So, like for this lab, I did all of the CSS, but for some reason it's not showing, and I don't know if I didn't link it correctly here. No, that one was already there. I did this one.
Yeah. So, did you add that line, or was that line like that?
I did the first one, but that one was already there. This is the second week. And this is what the page looks like.
Yeah, so if you inspect, it's usually the first thing to start. Yeah. So if you click on console, yeah, so it's saying can't find any of those pictures, and then here it's saying can't find a favicon, but everything else seems fine. Here's sources. Okay, so first thing is just Google search for how to link CSS into HTML. Yeah.
Should I have done the style?
So there's a couple things that look weird to me. I think one is the source should be text/CSS, not just CSS, but I actually would have expected it to still work. So if you copy that, pretty close. Except for that type CSS thing, which I wouldn't expect to be a problem. But okay, so now, first thing is, where is your style CSS? Okay, so there's a problem right there. So when you just put style CSS, we're in index.html, right? So that means we're in this root directory, which is called FEs, STPC, FE, whatever. CSS is a folder inside of that directory, and then style.css is inside of it. So if we want to access it, you have to do CSS/. Just like we would navigate in our terminal to get there by doing CD CSS. So now that should do it. So now if you refresh the page, not even that. I don't think it's saved. Maybe it did when you left it. Okay, now it should be good. So, okay, go back to the code. It's style.css, not styled. It's kind of weird to me. Normally your console should be giving you an error saying it can't find there. No, it did it. Okay, there you go. So your style is showing.
Okay, just not the photos.
Just not the photos because it's probably a similar thing. So the yeah, because they're
CSS.
well, so they're inside the images folder. So you have to do images slash.
Okay.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah. I thought.
So they're inside.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can just refresh the tab just to see.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah.
So it's like wrench in my plans. So my Dell out of the blue stopped working.
Okay.
I don't know how or why. But,
Yep.
So right now all I have access to is my Chromebook.
Okay.
To get it fixed. But
Okay.
so I think I can really only do like the labs. I can't do
The terminal.
the terminal.
Yeah.
Because,
I think that is probably true.
so yeah, I'll just follow along.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
So today I was thinking it would be better for me to, okay,
There you go. Yeah, that's good.
today, that's this one, I literally have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Today I was thinking it would be better, I want to try just,
You have to control C first.
I want to try just observing during the JavaScript part
Okay.
instead of taking notes and observing because I
Yeah.
need to.
Yeah, I'll try to call out too because I've noticed there are certain things that are particularly important to take notes on, and when I come across those, I can try to
Call them out. Yeah, but you don't need to follow along in terms of the actual coding.
Which Wi-Fi is it?
WeWork guesses.
Oh, that's probably what. Are you on WeWork Guest?
I don't know if it's
So if you go to WeWork,
no, I'm on WeWork.
okay, yeah,
Oh,
just WeWork, yeah. The connection's a lot better. It's faster.
What's the password?
If I remember correctly,
Is it WeWork?
I think it's passport. I think it's P@SSWORD. Maybe an exclamation point. Capital P.
might be able to see it. Yeah, I could be wrong with that. You can just connect to the WeWork Guests. It's just a little bit slower. But hey, what's up, man? How you doing? Good, good. Yeah, no problem, man.
Tether on terminal, I said that you can't like do everything.
Say that again. I couldn't.
I said since Chrome and Tether on like terminal, I said why can't you do the same stuff?
Since there's, I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying since Chromebook Tether on like terminal, I said why is it that you can't do like the
Oh,
same thing?
you should be able to.
Oh,
If it has a terminal.
yeah, I know that.
I just didn't, I assumed it didn't because Chromebooks are so,
So funky.
yeah, because they're just internet connected boxes basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that should be fine. So go ahead and go to,
What did you say?
oh, I see. So it opens up. Interesting. Type LS.
It's kind of a chart.
Okay, type dirt.
Like
Yeah. You may have to, so the biggest problem is, again, the translation of commands.
yeah.
So if you search for Linux, or search for Bash Terminal Chromebook,
That's true.
so BASH.
This one.
Or click on that one. Yeah, I think it's there. Oh, they didn't try and do it. That's not it.
Okay.
They want you to install Linux on your Chromebook.
Gotcha.
Which you could do. I mean, honestly, having a Chromebook is about the same as putting Ubuntu. Like, it's not that difficult. Ubuntu is like, I mean, it's a lot like what the Chromebook OS looks like. It would feel very familiar and all of that. It's just the terminal would actually do the things you want it to do.
Okay.
So that is something to potentially look into doing.
So maybe installing that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I'll play around with it.
yeah.
Is backslash the folder or the folder backslash?
So, if you think about a directory structure, right, normally you would do things like, so let's say that the root of our computer is users, and then I want to be able to indicate visually that something is underneath of that.
Okay.
So you might do something like this, or you might do something like this, right? In either case, I'm putting the thing after. You see what I'm saying? So like in a directory structure, if you clicked on this, you'd expect files to show up underneath, or you'd expect them to show up to the right in the window.
Okay.
So if we have users and then code, right? So we could do it in one of these two ways. And either way, we're putting it to the right of. And so what we would do for our command line is user/code. So it's folder name slash thing. Now, if you put it before users, what this slash at the very beginning says is I want to go to the very root of my computer, which is to say, like, I want to go to the hard drive where there are no folders above it, and then I want to go from there, which you probably don't want to do.
So so for the box style lab,
Yep.
I put that for the background, but it's just not showing up.
Yeah, so that's where the before images that you have, that's saying go to the very root of the computer, which in your case is, we can actually find out. So, so you want to remove it, but I'll show you why. So if you Control C here, so if you type ls space /, that'll show you what's inside of the slash directory. It's all kinds of stuff that you have no idea about, right? So if instead you do ls dot slash, space dot slash, that says show me everything that's in this directory. So what you really, so you could do dot slash images, or you can just leave it the way that it is. Those are the same thing.
Okay. But this isn't working. Oh, it was there. And it went away. So maybe I should do the dot slash.
Is it not there now?
No, it just went away after I didn't move the slash. After I took away the slash. So maybe if I try.
So hold on. So let me. You go inside of images. Is it Whitewood in here? Whitewood JPG. Yeah, I mean that should be fine. What we had should also be fine. Well, okay. So you're in style.css, right? Which is inside of the directory of CSS. So you have to go up a directory, right? So style.css. So here. So you're inside of this fe-whatever folder, right? And inside of that, there's a directory called CSS. There's another one called images. And then you also have some files, right? So you have like index.html, right? Inside of CSS is style.css. And inside of images is the whitewood.jpg.
Yeah.
So if you're in style.css, you're inside of the CSS folder. So you can't just say images/whitewood because right here there is no images directory.
Okay.
There's an images directory in the FE folder, which is a folder above you, right? So to go up a directory, you have to do /images/your image.
Okay. Let's see. I was having a hard time with the gradients. Let me see.
A hard time with the what?
The linear gradient. Oh, so I didn't know what to apply to. So therefore the headings and not the rest of the section. So I wasn't sure that, because at first I put it on these, but then it did it to the entire thing. So they're only for this part and not on this here.
So you see, you have the indifferent class right there and right here. So whenever you put any style on the indifferent, both of those things are going to get it. So I don't know.
Yeah, so I thought maybe I should put the indifferent class in H4.
Okay.
So I did that, but I don't think that's working.
So it'll show up in both of those places now, or it should. Oh, you have indifferent. Okay, so that is not. You're not selecting it correctly. So what this is saying is, look at the indifferent element, and then go look at all of its children. So everything nested underneath of it for an H4 element. But what you want to say is, I want to find an H4 element that has the indifferent class on it. So the way you do that is you just type H4 dot indifferent. So you put them together, and then you can delete the H4.
So I don't even want to problem with like selectors.
Okay.
It's just like, before I guys got this class, I think it was just like,
Yeah, sure.
it's more here.
using the adjacent sibling selector. So the adjacent sibling selector is, I mean, you just look. So the easiest thing, and that's just good practice. Let's just Google what is the adjacent sibling selector. Okay, or if you have it. So just search for adjacent. So Command F on the page will get you a search. Okay, so they just don't call it that. So let's just search the web for adjacent siblings. A-C-E-N-T. A-D-J. Yeah. A-C-E-N-T. Yeah. Sibling. Yeah. No, you got it. Sibling selector. Yeah. So click on that. Now I'll tell you that's what the adjacent sibling selector is. So you say, I want to find an image that has an adjacent sibling of P, a paragraph tag. So you do the plus. So that's what yeah. So I do. Yep, select the image based on it being a sibling. So, how do you know it's kitty 4 that you're looking for? Is that the fourth? So it has an alt tag of kitty space 4, and not a class.
That's what I do. That's easy. Because I was getting like error messages on the side.
Yeah. So what it wants you to do, scroll up, is instead of doing kitty -4, so that would select an element that was named kitty/4. What we want to do is find, so we want to find, yeah, the alt tag, which is going to be, so it'll be alt, I don't know, we want to do, so what kind of element was it? So it's an image, yeah. So if you go back,
So do the whole image source.
so what you want to do is, so back to the, so it's going to be delete the quotes, okay. And then we're going to do img, and then in square brackets, alt equals, and then in quotes, kitty space 4. So let's say if you scroll up. Yeah, it's frustrating. Okay, so they are looking for you to have a very specific, it's right here. I think. Let's see. So. Great cheap. If you go look at the spec here.
Must be the formatting of the image.
Well, I don't see the. Oops. I don't see the error message that you're getting. Wasn't it that? Okay. So kitten wheelbarrow selects the image inside the element with basket. I mean, you have that one, don't you?
Yeah, I got this first two.
food basket. Game over selects the images of the element.
So I get all that.
Here, it's this one. Okay, so you don't have this yet.
No, I don't know.
And you had that one before, it was full, I think, but yeah, so it's just the next thing there, probably. Keep going. Oh, no, I think it was that one.
So this guy has something.
Yeah, so if you,
But that should be red.
well, paste what you just copied out of there.
Yep.
Yep, that's it. So
That's it.
try learning it. Okay, so fiber passing. So now it's just, yeah.
You're getting a thing.
Yep.
Yeah, you can look at that spec file for help on what's missing.
I don't know why my background is not big enough. I put cover.
Oh, the image. Press Command 0. Command minus. A couple times. Yeah. So I think it's like, well, let me see your citizens.
Sam, what we doing right now?
I'm just helping people.
Alright,
I'll get back to it in just a second.
no, that's cool, I can work on some stuff.
So
Here.
that's probably fine. Don't do height 100%.
It's not doing
You do it twice.
anything. They put the first one,
Okay, that's fine.
but see, it's how it looked before I had
Yeah, it's not gonna get any bigger than the image is as big as it is. What makes you think it's supposed to actually be bigger than that?
it. It said to put background cover, and
Yeah.
that it would look like this.
Okay, scroll down here. Take a look.
Which lab is that? The animal save lab or?
The box style line.
Oh yeah. So this is an interesting one. If you, let me see, I might actually have it saved here. But if you go do the next lab, I'm pretty sure the next lab gives you the answer to this lab.
The adding responsive features line.
Or it might be the animal save lab.
for joining the middle level and maximum width and height?
I don't. So when you say that the HTML on the body should be 100% height and 100% width, it's just for whatever relative to its containing element. And in your case, 100% is just whatever the size is when it's open for those two things. So it can only be as big as the window. Now the image itself is of a certain size, and so if the image is relatively small, it can only scale to be as big as it's allowed to be. So it by default will just be whatever the size of the actual image is in pixels. So you have to change the size of the actual picture to get it to move to be big enough. But I think nope. Go back to mine. Because I didn't actually do the cover image. But yeah, so you're not doing anything wrong. But we can go take a look at image cover CSS example. That's probably that piece. No. So here's the cover example. So they're just doing background image URL and then putting in the URL name, background repeat, it's background repeat, no repeat, background size, cover, and then that's it. And then you can change. Yeah, so that should be doing it. I think the problem is if you go back to your code or back to the website and right click and inspect it. So click on the body. Okay, so you see how the body is only that big? It's not big enough, right? So that's the problem. So if you make the body height be 2,000 pixels, just change it right there. So just go back to the code and just change it there. Just make it 2,000 pixels. Yeah, and then it should be good. There you are. That's all. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start today by again going through our Git exercises and then doing a little bit of JavaScript, and then we're going to get into responsive web design, and flexboxes. So should be pretty cool. To get started, how do we make sure that we're in a clean state to start creating some new functionality on our app? So the first thing we're going to do is get status. And we're going to want to create a new branch from master that's called yourname-media. So how do we get to a clean state where we have a new branch with yourname-media?
Well, we might have to commit some files first.
You might have to. So let's start by how do we get to our learning-get-to directory?
PWD.
So we can PW. I actually am there, but let me just like open up a new thing. Yep. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm not there. So if I PWD, it says I'm in users Samuel Birk / full measure. So what do I need to do?
Alice, real quick.
Yep.
I don't know where your stuff is at.
So here, I'll help you. Let's go look in the Finder and find it. So it's. So we'll go here and then Flatiron and then learning-get to. So how do I get there?
Cool. So you want to go back up a file directory.
So you want to go up.
CD.
Yep. And if I PWD, I'm going to use Samuel Birk. And if I ls.
Yep. CD into the Flatiron.
We'll use a little trick. I'll start typing Flatiron and see if it shows up, and it does. So I tab and it auto-completes.
Cool.
And then those are the files I have available. Those are the directories I have.
And then CD into the learning-get. Cheater.
Yeah, it's just tab. It's just tabbing. Okay, so let's get everybody there. So how would you get there? Because yours isn't in Flatiron DC. So where is your code located? In code. So what do you need to do to be able to get to your learning-get to? Okay.
Code.
Yeah. So
ls, and then you'll see that it's probably a learning-get.
Yeah. So this is a good exercise for like figuring out how to do it. We do this every single class, right? So write this down somewhere. CD tilde, which means your user directory, /code /learning-get to. Okay. Every time you want to get there, no matter where you are, when you open your terminal, if you do this command, you will get to your directory. Okay. So it's saying change directory to my home directory, which has inside of it a code directory, which has inside of it a learning-get to directory. And then when you run pwd, you should see that you're inside of your learning-get to directory. All right, so then what's the next step? So we need to do get status, right? We said that. Get status. And in my case, I am on branch sam-media. So I'm already here, but we'll still go through this exercise. You might be on some other branch. It says that I've modified some things, changed some files. Okay, so if I want to get back into a clean state and I want to get to master and check out a new branch to start with my functionality, what do I need to do?
You need to add and commit those files.
Yep, so let's add.
Dash.
So we'll do the dot and then commit.
And message.
And then, yep, get push origin, the name of the branch. Okay, what's next?
I like to get status in there.
Yep, just make sure everything's good.
Then you want to get back to origin master and pull whatever is on there, right?
Yep.
So we want to get checkout master.
Yep.
Take us to the master branch and get pull origin master.
Yep.
Now we have a clean state and we can add anything we want.
Yeah, so then we can get checkout dash B, our name slash media. I already have one, so I'm going to go back to it. But okay. Get status on there. And we should be in a nice clean state. I wrote a little bit of code before class started today, so I already have a place to start. But that's how we do that process. Okay. So we do the CD piece. I'm just going to draw out quickly. So this process looks like this, right? So get status, always get add dot get commit dash m, so message, get push origin branch name. Okay, this is one section, right? Then we say get checkout master, get full origin master, and then get checkout dash B, some branch name. This is the second piece. And then when we're finished with that, we do this again, and then 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 we do this again. Right? This is all we do. This is get. This is 90% of what you're going to do in your workload. It's get. Okay. So it's just these two pieces. So make sure you have this copied down as well. We'll do this over and over and over and over and over. Okay. Yeah, and I would even, like, if you have some way of drawing this so that you can see these, all these commands are headers, right? You do all these commands, and then you do all these commands when you're done with your feature, and then you do all these commands again, and then you do all these commands again. It's just over and over and over and over. Okay, so the JavaScript exercise that we're going to start with today, I have a random number. There's a way of getting random numbers in JavaScript. It's this piece of code here. So math.random will give me a random decimal number. So I'm going to multiply it by 10. It's going to be, the random decimal number is somewhere between 0 and 1. So I'm going to multiply it by 10 so that it becomes a number between 0 and 10. I'm going to multiply it, and then I'm going to add 1 so that it's a number between 1 and 10. Okay. So math.random gives us a decimal between 0 and 1. Multiply it by 10, that gives us a number between 0 and 9 actually, and then I'm going to add 1, and that's going to give us a number between 1 and 10, and then I'm going to take the 4 because what we would end up with is
When you say math.random gives
Yeah.
you a decimal.
Here, I'll show you. So, if I console.log, math.random, this is a JavaScript function that is available as a part of the language. So you can call this anywhere. You can look this up on Google, but math.random gives me back a random decimal. So if I refresh, every time it's random.
And what are those decimals?
They're not for anything. They're literally like, this is just a random number generator. Its whole purpose is to randomly generate a number.
Okay.
That's all it does.
Why is it in the language?
Because for situations like this, so people will oftentimes want to like create test suites that have random numbers that are generated. Each time the test gets run, you want a different number. Or because you're trying to create a game, like maybe you're trying to create a game and you want the deck to be randomly ordered, you can use the random number generator to reorder your deck as a seed, or like maybe you're creating a thing that flips a coin, and so you want a random number generator, or maybe you are trying to create a graph, a mathematical graph of like a normal curve, and so you want a random number generator. So, or you're trying to create a dice game. Like there's lots of reasons to potentially have a random number. So this, in our case, what we're going to do is essentially I'm using the random numbers so that you can create a function that is going to return true if it is an even number, and it's going to return false if it's not an even number. Okay, so that's where we're going to get to. So, but what's happening here, right, is math.random. So whatever this number is, we're going to multiply it by 10. So in this case, that would be 6.6916 whatever, right? And then we're going to add 1 to it. So then it's going to be 7.69617. And then we're going to floor it. What math.floor does is it just removes the decimals. So it goes from 7.697 to 7. Okay, that makes sense? So that's all we're doing. So we have a random number between 1 and 10 is what random number is. Okay. So if I wanted to create a function that is going to return true when it's an even number and false when it's an odd number, how would I go about doing that?
Conditional.
We'd need a conditional. Yep. What's the first step? Okay, but I want to create a function that does this. So yeah, so let's create a function. So how?
Okay. Yeah. So
yeah, I know it's simple, but yeah. So function, and then we can name. Let's call it is even. Right. And then what else do I need to do to create the rest of my function?
You need to open curlies, right? After that.
Yep, open curlies.
And then drop the closing one.
Yep.
And then in between that, that's when the if will come in.
That's where the if comes in. So what do we type?
If. Parentheses again. And then you want to say. So what are you trying to do again?
Yeah, so I want to be able to pass into my function this random number, and I want to, if it's even, I want to return true, and if it's not, I want to return false.
So it's probably a quicker way you can do this, but I would probably put like the different objects in there, like 1, 3, 5.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Let's start there. Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah, let's start super simple, and then we can refactor. It's called refactor when you improve the code.
So would you, and I don't know this at all, I'm just going off conceptual.
Yep.
Would you put if math.floor equals 1, 3, 5, 7, or 9?
So we could do it that way, right? Like we could take this and move it inside of our function, but we already have it assigned to random numbers. So
Random number.
yeah, so what do we want to do?
Random number.
Okay, if random number equals 1, we'll start with that. So this is our false condition then that we're going to end up with. Say that?
Random.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, doesn't Adam, because you already declared the variable, should it already recognize it as you start typing it?
It does. I'm actually using RubyMine right now, which definitely will, but yes, it should. Both of them will. Okay.
So you can put all of them right there?
Yeah, so you can, so the way that you do this is you can use it's called an operator, it's an OR operator. So you can say if this is true, or that is true, or this other thing is true. And the way that we do that is like this.
So you can put just 1, 3, 5, you have to put the random number again.
Yeah, so the way to get to what you're getting to is you would create an array of the numbers that are odd. So 1, 3, 5, 7. And then you would, yeah, and then you would say if this includes the random number, then, but we're not going to get to that point today. We're just going to do this very simple example. Okay, so if any of those things, then
to return true or whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, so false in this case. otherwise, so how do we otherwise return true? So when it's even.
Else.
And then,
Same thing, but just with the two random numbers equal to 2, 4.
so we're gonna, so else says,
Else, you can just keep it as else, right?
yeah, because else, yeah, because it says otherwise. If it didn't match the if statement, then, so we want to put return true here, right? Okay. Return false, return true. Now, I think you guys are going to get lucky, maybe? We'll see. Okay, so if I console log out is even, I did it. Okay. But what if I want to be able to pass in not just random number, or here, let's do it this way. What if I don't define random number up here, but I define it down here? What's going to happen now? Remember, computers read everything from top to bottom.
I have a question. When you change inside console log is even,
Mm-hmm.
the function name change?
What's that? So I had math.random in console log before, so it was just logging out the random number. So now I want to log out the result of calling as even, right? So that's all I did. Does that make sense? Okay, so if I refresh the page at this point, what are we going to see happen?
It's going to say undefined.
It's going to say undefined. Why is that?
Because you haven't declared what random number is yet.
Yeah,
before the function.
before it calls it. How could I fix that? Let's move it back to the top. Yeah. So what I'm trying to get at it is, so random number right now we're defining it inside of our code. But imagine that instead of defining inside of the code, you're calling it from like some outside source, like you're getting it from an API that exists out in the world. Like what you're really doing is you're searching Yelp and you're saying, if I pass up the search term fast food, do I get anything back, right? So instead of as even, maybe we're writing a function that says exist in 10 miles, right? And so if I send up the API request and I get back a variable, it might not be available at the top of my file. Like it's just not possible. So what's another way that we can pass random number into is even? And in fact, let me just change the name of this to be number to help with that. So this will be our random number. Because technically the function doesn't know that it's a random number, it just wants to check if a number is even. But what are we missing? What's the thing that allows you to have access to variables inside of a function? Yep.
Parameter.
Yeah. So how would I put...
So you would actually put, would you put it in the console part or the function part? So you would put, oh, it's even n, I guess? Or would you put a number in the console part?
Okay, so when we put parameters in, we have to declare what those parameters are. Whatever parameters we put in, whatever is passed in as a parameter becomes a variable inside of the function. So in our case, we're using number as a variable inside of our function. So if we want to get access to that, we need to declare it here. So it either has to be declared there or it has to be declared here for the function to know what number it's supposed to be. Okay, so it's the same thing. If I put number here and then I call 10, that is the same as me doing you see what's happening there? So I can either pass a number into the function as a parameter, which will then make number whatever the number is that was passed in, or I can declare number explicitly in the function. Now the whole point of functions is that it's reusable code that we can use over and over again. So typically speaking, like in this case, we would want to declare number this way. Because then we can say is even 10, and what are we going to get back? True every time, right?
So would you, in that case,
I did
The
11.
random number part wouldn't really apply to this thing, would it?
So the random number doesn't currently do anything, yeah, as things are set up. But how could I make the random number have an impact on this? I just replace the number with random number. We're back to 50-50, so sometimes you flip a coin a whole bunch of times and you get heads in a row. But so do we understand what's happening here, though? So remember back, what are variables?
Variables are. Something else.
It means
Storages of data.
it's-
You can assign values to.
It stores data that you can assign values to. There's two words to remember with variables every time. Like we're just gonna have to beat it into our heads. They're aliases. They substitute. Okay? They're aliases. They substitute. What are variables?
Aliases that substitute.
Okay. So, what are variables?
Aliases that
substitute.
substitute.
Okay. All right. So, if we're reading this, then what is random number at this point?
Very.
The random number.
It's some random number. So let's pretend that this output isn't random and it's just 10 all the time. Okay, so if random number is 10, what is random number right here? 10. So just like when we put 10, like literally put the number 10 in here, it's exactly the same as putting variable random number, which is equal to 10. Right? It's an alias, it's a substitution.
I think what gets newbies like us going is like we're used to seeing random equals 10 and say, okay, that's a variable. When now you say random equals all of this, in our minds, like, is that still a variable or is that some other?
Yeah, so this is going to be some actual number that's
Right.
output, right? Yeah, and so you do have to like wrap your mind around when I call this function, I'm getting back some number that exists. But in the end, it is some number, right? The computer is figuring it out for us, but it's exactly the same as being 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 or whatever. So if random number is 10 and this is 10, then what is number up here? So we're passing 10 into is even, which is to say we're setting number equal to 10. So what is number? 10.
Okay. Because the is even.
Just because that's considered a parameter as well.
The name means nothing. So let's go back to, I'm going to rename number Blue. Bluey.
So wait, is even is not a variable?
Is even is not a variable. Is even is a function.
The name of the function.
Okay.
Is the name of the function, right? So is even is a function. When we call the function, we can pass parameters into it. When we pass parameters in, all we're doing is setting a variable that can be used within the function to whatever the value of the variable being passed in is. So I can make this.
Parameter is a variable. It has some twist to it, right?
Yeah, so a parameter is a variable that is only available to the code inside of the function. So like red hawk doesn't mean anything outside of the function. It only means something inside of the function. Okay, but it has nothing to do with the name. The name of variables is meaningless. We're just making them up. That's the point of doing this exercise. Okay, so if I said Blue Ye, it's like Kanye's second son or something. So Blue Ye is, let's say it's 2 at this point. Like we get a random number, it happens to be 2. So what is Blue Ye here? 2. And then we're calling the is even function. By calling it, I mean we're saying is even, and then we have an open and close parentheses with the parameter Blue Ye, which we said is 2. So it's going to call this function. So it's going to be is even, and then it's going to set the parameter red hawk equal to
Blue
Ye, which is 2. Yeah, so that's the alias substitution piece. You just keep going back until you get a real thing. a real number, a real string, a real boolean. So red hawk is 2. So now when we look at red, so is red hawk 1? Is it 3, 5, 7, 9? So all of these are false. So where do we go? Else. So what do we get back? True. Okay. So blue yay is still 2, but what we log out is true.
So if you put blue A equals 2 right now and call a function,
Yep.
it'll say true.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so if instead of doing this, if I explicitly set it to be 2, we get true every time.
I don't know why I would think it would be undefined that blue A and red hawk don't match. I don't know why I thought that.
That's the thing. So, and this is that is one of the hardest concepts to get through, is that our parameter, what's really happening here is that it's being reset every time it's called to be whatever is passed in here. So it is not undefined, it is whatever was called with down here, which in our case is blue yay, and blue yay is 2. So this is where the alias thing is so important, because what it really is saying is, we're going to say 2 equals blue yay, which equals red hawk. So then when we're doing this substitution, we say, okay, we have red hawk. So what is red hawk? Well, red hawk is blue yay, and blue yay is 2, so red hawk is 2. See? Yeah, yeah? Okay.
That reminded me of Aria being the mini face card.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's right. Yes, that's a great way of putting
on
it.
season 6 right now, so I just got that part.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
after that,
it's the many-faced god. It's substitution. That's a great example, right? It is. It's just an alias. It's substitution. It's just something acting as something else. But in the end, she's always Arya, even though she says she's no one. She is. She's Arya, and she comes back to that eventually. You'll find out.
Oh.
So, oh, but she is something man. So that's a great thing. Is that me?
If we weren't trying to put this on our screen, which the console.log part means,
Yep.
if we just put is even blue yay,
Yep.
that would be essentially calling that function, right?
Yes.
That's how you call a function. Right?
Yeah. So normally you would do something like this.
But that number wouldn't be, in this case, this number wouldn't be stored anywhere.
It wouldn't be stored. You wouldn't see it anywhere. It doesn't. But it would. The computation would happen. The computer would run the code in exactly the same way. It just you wouldn't be able to see it. It would just be in memory.
Right.
Okay. We're gonna try one more mind-blowing topic before we move on to the CSS stuff, because it's gonna become useful as we go deeper into the DOM, like actually putting stuff on the screen.
So what
Yeah.
were we actually going over in this case? Were we trying to learn?
I'm just trying to, part of it is just doing this over and over and over again. So we got to see variables again, we got to see functions again, and we got to see conditionals again.
Gotcha.
So those are the 3 big things there. We didn't do loops. I'm not going to do loops today because I want to introduce a different concept. But we'll do those 4 things over and over and over and over. Okay. So you can pass a function into a function as a parameter. Mm-hmm. So let's create so this will be finished, and it's going to take in a function called started. And inside of this function, we're going to have a parameter called beginning. Let's say in progress. And we're going to set it equal to true initially. Okay, we're going to set it to true initially, and then eventually in progress is going to become false. And we're going to call our started function with in progress as the variable at each one of these points. Okay. So essentially, like if you can imagine a process that's taking a long time, like you're uploading something. Actually, let's call this status. So let's say that you're uploading an image and it takes a really long time. You want to be able to get a report back saying like how much progress has been made, right? So it's got, usually you'll see a percentage bar. We're just going to use it's still in progress or it's not in progress anymore. We're done, okay? So we're going to create a function that's called still uploading. And we're going to assume that we're going to get a variable that tells us whether it's still in progress or not. And we are going to console log out still in progress. So if it's in progress, otherwise, finished. Okay. And then we are going to call still uploading out here. Okay. Sorry. I'm going to call finished. Okay. What the hell is going on here? So, we defined our first function, which is called finish, right? And that's really what's going to keep track of whether we are continuing to be in progress or not. And what it's going to do is, so let's say that it's still in progress. It's going to call our status function with the in progress variable, so in this case true, and then it's going to call that function a second time with false. Now, what's happening down here is we're saying we're going to pass into finished, not a variable like we have been, but a function. So in this case, we're going to pass in still uploading. So what is status at this point? So it's still uploading, so it's this whole function. It's the whole thing. So status becomes that whole function. So then when we call status here, what are we really calling? So again, status is what?
The function.
It's this whole function, right?
Yeah.
So status at this point then is
This whole function.
still uploading. This is this because it gets passed in here as the function. Okay.
Why does it say in progress twice under the finished function? Like in progress equals true, in progress equals false.
So I'm going to do a thing to make it feel asynchronous. I'm going to put a debugger in, so we'll stop after the first one for a little bit, and then I'll manually trigger it to move forward in the code. I'm trying to simulate what it would be like if you were waiting for something to finish.
Okay, so are we doing them, we have it as true and false because the function is a function?
Well, we have it as true and false because the function's going to get called twice.
Okay.
Right, so at this point on line 2, it's going to call this function, which will say at that point, so in progress right here is what?
True.
True. So what
I
is,
think there's, did you mean, so in this function, it's still uploading function.
yep,
It's either, if it's in progress,
yep,
what's the else? What else would it be if it's,
finished.
what,
So let me walk through this all the way through because I think it'll help. So okay, so finished, still uploading, status is still uploading. So when we get to this line right here, line 2, in progress is what again? What's in progress right here?
True.
True. Okay, so in status is still uploading. So what we're really doing is calling still uploading. So what is progress here? So status is still uploading. In progress is the parameter that we're passing. In progress we just said is true, right?
Yeah.
So we're calling this function. So what is progress at this point?
True.
True. So in progress, in progress. So true, in progress is calling progress. Right here we're setting progress equal to in progress, which is true, right? So what are we going to console log out then?
still in progress?
Okay. So then we get to the second, so on line 4, in progress right here is what?
False.
False. So status again is this function. In progress is false. So what is progress right here?
False.
False. So what are we going to console log out?
Finished.
Finished.
Okay, so it only does the first one at a time, like only one of them at a time.
Yeah, all code executes in JavaScript one thing at a time.
Okay.
It goes line by line, executing, and it won't do the next line until the previous line is finished.
Okay.
You get that?
Yeah.
So I have a question here about
Yeah.
Yeah.
That this one's a little
Oh
tough.
yeah, this is hard. This is really hard. So this is what's called an anonymous function. It's an incredibly powerful thing. We're going to see this a lot when we're doing document object model manipulation, because and we saw it, I think, even last time because I did a quick example. The on-click handlers, the event handlers, so when you say like when I click on a button, they take anonymous functions. And so what you would do is, so finished is taking an anonymous function. We could similarly create a function called after click. We're going to assume that that's going to get a parameter passed to it. And what we're really trying to get to is document.get element by ID, pass it in some ID, dot add event listener, click, comma, after click.
Would you need to put the button in your HTML?
Yeah, so we'd have to go through the process of putting the button in the HTML, actually assigning an ID of ASD, but then when we click on it, because we've added this event listener to it, it would call this anonymous function, and it would give us back this event parameter. So what I'm trying to do, the reason to start having this conversation about anonymous functions at this point, is that where we're going is going to use a lot of these anonymous functions, and this event parameter is going to be available to you, and I want you to have some idea of where that's coming from. It's not magic. They're doing what we're doing right here. Okay. So I'll push the code up like that and leave it. So if you want to go play with it, it's just the sam-media. So here, I'll show you this too. So I'm going to put a debugger there. What that's going to do is when I have my console open, it will stop in the code during execution at that point. So the computer will start to execute my code, and then it's going to stop where the debugger is. So it won't go do lines 5 and 6 until I press a button to say keep going. So we can kind of simulate this process of waiting. So this debugger only works when you have your console open. Otherwise, it doesn't affect your code. So just to be clear. All right. So you see here, I've stopped right here. You can see I have still in progress right here. That's because we called this code one time by calling status. You can actually see when I scroll over status, it tells me it's actually still uploading. Right? And then if I continue, so I allow it to process lines 5 and 6, we see we get finished.
Okay. So if you didn't have the debugger, then it would just print them both?
It would just print them both, yeah. So they're just there. That's all. Okay. Which it still is executing in time. It's just that the computer is so fast that we don't get any like reasonable human feedback. So that's why I put the debugger. But that's all. So that kind of makes sense. Are there questions right now about that I can try to help answer? Part of it is just doing it over and over and letting it sink in, but I would recommend that if this is hard, try to look up anonymous functions and see if you can get a little bit more insight into. Yeah, you might want to write that down. So anonymous functions. And the reason why, do you guys see why they're called anonymous functions?
Yes, because you're getting a different thing every time.
Yeah, so for example, I have my still uploading function, but I could create another one that's called uploading progress. And have it give back something more like in progress and then just finished. And I could call finish the first time was still uploading and the second time was uploading progress. And what would we see in this case?
Is it going to call them both?
It's going to call them both.
Okay,
So
you would see still in progress, finished, in progress, just finished.
Yep. See that? And that's what's nice about anonymous functions is that you can send the whole function in and then execute all of the code related to what you get back as a parameter from the function that you're putting in.
Okay.
So again, this will become particularly important when we get to event listeners and the document object model. Okay. All right. So that's the crazy JavaScript stuff. This is an introduction. It's okay if you don't completely understand it. I would recommend that you look up anonymous functions. But okay. Cool. All right. The next thing I'm going to talk about is responsive web design. Does anybody know what responsive web design is? Why it's important? What do we use it for?
Mobile devices.
Yeah, it's primarily because of mobile devices. What happened is people used to design everything using pixels, which was fine when everybody had crappy square monitors and everybody had about the same size and pixels weren't very big and that type of thing. The responsive web design actually started, I think, it started barely when desktop sizes started to change. So when we went to like HD and we started to have the rectangular displays as opposed to the square displays, you needed some way of dealing with that. The first approach to this, and you guys have probably all seen this before, is if it was a larger rectangle, they would just put like side things, like a gray side on each side of the website, and your main content is in the middle. And that was a way of dealing with off the screen of this, but on the screen of this. But then, yeah, responsive web design really took off when mobile devices started to become a big deal. And at this point, I think last year actually, mobile usage on the internet became more common than web usage. So in fact, if we go look at, did I drop the website? I might have, oh no, here we go. So this is analytics on every government website that exists out there that's participating in this. And you can actually see that right now, there's 42.2% mobile usage, but plus 5.9% tablet usage. So really, what is that, 48% non-desktop usage. And these are government websites. Like, if anybody is not going to be using mobile, it's probably the government, right? Because most of the people are sitting at their desk and going to these websites. So that is how pervasive mobile is.
I'm actually surprised.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would assume most government can't use your phone or something like
Yeah, I mean, definitely for the top secret stuff. Right now, these aren't all being accessed just by people in the government, right? So studentloans.gov.
Yeah, that's me right there, all 430.
USA Jobs.
USA Jobs, yeah. But they are all government websites. So even those that you might think are
National Weather Service, of course.
yeah, absolutely, right. So even those that you might think would be behind the times, they still need to be mobile ready. So okay, so there were a couple of approaches to how to deal with mobile. Some of the early ones were based on having two websites. So you would build your website for desktop, and then you would look. So the browser provides you with metadata about the person who's coming, which is where actually all of these analytics are coming from. So it tells you things like what is their operating system, what browser are they using, what's their device type. Right? So what people started with was, okay, I know desktop and mobile need to be very different in terms of how they're laid out, etc. So when they come to my website through a mobile app, I'm just going to redirect them to m. whatever the name of or mobile. Whatever the name of my website is. What do you guys think is a problem with that?
You have to do it twice.
You have to do it twice. I'm a developer. I'm lazy. I don't want to do work twice. I want to do it one time.
And maintenance.
Yeah, that's right. Maintenance. So everything is double. Everything is duplicated. So the next step in responsive design then was to start to deal with what the browser looks like based on the size of the screen. And the primary way that you do this is by using media queries. Media queries basically say, if I'm on a screen and I am at a certain width, then I want the display to look like X, and if I'm at a different width, I want it to look like Y. And we're going to go over some examples of that. We also, there's been a big push recently for what's called mobile first design. So there's basically, you could do desktop first or you could do mobile first. People have generally tended to, the trend is towards mobile first design. Why do you think that might be?
Because of the trends of how people are using.
So that's a big part of it, is that there's so many more people that are using mobile. The other thing is this. So when you think about a typical desktop design, right, a lot of times you've got a lot of space that you're working with, and so you'll put a lot of stuff on there. Right? So in a typical website, you might have a sidebar over here. You're going to have a header up here. You might have some call outs over here. You might have this like thing that when you click it, it takes over the full screen, right? It's very complicated because you have a lot of space. When you're designing a mobile site, it's much simpler. It's like I have a list, right? And then when I click on that list, then something else happens. The nice thing about doing mobile first is that this, although it might not look the best or be the most useful, translates very easily into that. Because a list here just becomes a wider list when you go to desktop, right? This craziness, when you put it on a phone, is going to look like crap. It's completely unusable. It's all squished together. That's right. That's right. So that's why people generally take a mobile first strategy with these things. All right. So we're going to look a little bit at media queries, and we're going to use it with our Flexbox so we can get started seeing both of those things. So what I have set up right now, if we go to my index.html file, it's the same index.html file that we've been working with for a while now. Inside of the body, I've created an article element. Inside of the article, there's a header, there's a main, and there's a footer. Okay, you can probably imagine what this is going to look like. If you want to, yeah. When we go in and look at what the page actually looks like, we see that we have a header and then a main and then a footer, right? That would just happen largely by default. We're getting some slightly nicer things in terms of they're all sized the right way because I'm using Flexbox already. But what's interesting is if I get the screen to be big enough, I don't want it to be header, main, footer. What I really want is left side, center, right side. Okay? So the way this is set up, when you hit a certain media query, when your screen size gets large enough, it actually makes those things move in their positioning. The way that we do that So this is just some basic coloring of the article, divs, the header and the footer, etc. Nothing too fancy, it's just making them gray. The interesting piece comes in here. So we start by saying our article is going to be display flex, which is to say that all of its children elements, in our case header, main, and footer, we want to have display flex. Display flex is going to equally size things, and because we're saying flex direction is column, it's going to force them to be in a column to start with. Okay. But then we say when, so this is a media query, when the media is screen and the min width is 600 pixels, then I want to switch it to row. And when the media is screen and the max width is 600 pixels, then I want to switch it to column. So at 600 pixels, we're switching between whether we're going to display it as a row or as column. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. So and that's it. That's all we're doing. This media screen can be a couple of other things. It could be print. 90% of the time, you're just going to be using screen though. All right, so that's pretty much it. You can change anything that you want to here. So we could, for example, change the background color when we reach a certain so we could say once we get here, then I want the background color to be red, the header. Right, so it's red when it's there, but as it gets smaller, it goes away. Okay, so that's all media queries are. They're just saying apply this set of CSS when I reach a certain size, apply this other set of CSS when I'm not. That's it. Okay. Another important thing of note inside of our index.html is this meta tag. So you see here it says meta name equals viewport, content equals width, device width, initial scale equals 1. The reason for this is if you've ever gone onto a website that doesn't have this tag, you've probably seen this, and I'm sure you have. It will look like you're zoomed way out. The reason is, by default, what mobile devices try to do, and this just comes from historically, there were no good websites, and so they just said, we'll try and show all of it. What they're trying to do is zoom out and show you the entire website at once, and then you're supposed to zoom in to go find the pieces. Now that we're doing responsive design, we don't want it to do that. We want it to go back to like, I want you to feel like you're a desktop website. I don't want you zooming in. I just want you to use the pixels on the phone to figure out how to display it correctly. So by putting this meta tag on there, it's telling the phone's browser, don't zoom out. Just leave it however it is. Okay. So this is one of those things you just look up every time you start a project and put it in there. But that's when you're running into that situation, that's how you solve it. All right. All right, so then we're just going to go through a couple more Flexbox related attributes, but let's go ahead and, we've been talking for a while, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back and keep going. And then we'll try to give, I don't have too much more to go over, we'll try to give you guys the last hour so I can try and help you through whatever labs you're not able to complete, you haven't been able to complete so far. Okay.
What labs should we go to that?
So by next time, you should be finished everything through week 3.
And you're going to post week 4 after this class?
I'm about to do it right now, yep.
Get caught up this week.
Yeah, did you fall back a little bit?
Yeah.
So here's the thing, especially if you're behind, in order not to get frustrated, I would, again, try not to worry so much about the tests and actually getting the test to pass. I'd be a lot more concerned about trying to make it look nice when you're building it, when you put in an HTTP server. Is it doing what you expect it to do? Okay. That's the biggest thing. I also would, there's a couple of labs on selectors, and talk about like doing adjacent sibling selectors and child selectors and that type of thing. Play with it for a little bit, but don't spend too much time on it because, again, most of the time you're just going to use your classes and you're just going to explicitly say, if it has this class, then do this thing to it, and that's as far as you'll go with selectors. Okay. So, yeah, don't spend too much time on it. You probably won't use it all that much.
I see your HTML code.
Yep. One sec. Let me just.
And all of these are on your YouTube, right?
Yeah, so and I'm recording right now actually. But yeah, if you go to the Slack, let's see. So if I go to LearnCo and you go to our channel and then you click on the pin, on the side nav there is right here this crazy looking link for YouTube. That's a link to my channel. It's live right now, so you could actually go watch it.
Who's watching?
Somebody is watching, yeah. Oh no, that's me, I bet. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't do any editing, and it's just my computer's mic, so it's not necessarily the best, but it's at least something for review.
Is that the HTML code for that?
Sorry, I had it up and then sorry. Oops. So you can't see the ending of them, but.
And then this.
So let me, actually I can show you a cool thing, Chen, if you want.
I can pull it up.
Yeah, so you can do one of two things. You can go to GitLab and just look at the code, or you can actually, if we commit your code, you can fetch my code, check out my code, and then check out a branch for my code. So you can go from there. But if you go branches, there's a whole ton of them.
This is the video.
Yeah, so,
My atom is tricky sometimes. I think it's just the atom. Sometimes so it'll stop auto completing. So if I save it, close it out, open it back up, start typing again, it'll fix it. I don't know why it does that sometimes.
so did you change the theme?
Yeah. I actually like the lighter version.
Yeah, Adam seems to particularly have that issue with like when you're changing the branches in Git, it doesn't do a very good job of like updating itself for some reason if you had those files open. So yeah, you can also try Sublime, like if you want to try something else.
Yeah, I heard pretty good.
Yeah, Sublime's great. The only problem with Sublime is every once in a while when you save, it'll say, "Can you please give me some money? I'm poor and I'm making this all by myself." and you can cancel it every time and never actually pay, or you can pay it's like $40 or something to. Yeah, but the guy actually did build the entire thing basically by himself, and that's what he does for a living. And so yeah, I mean it's.
completely non-class related. By any chance, did you used to volunteer with Georgetown Ministry Center, like at the churches for the homeless?
No.
I'm really familiar. I'm like, where do I know you from outside of this?
Yeah. No, actually, I'm about to get a little bit more involved with their Chi Alpha fraternity
Okay.
at Georgetown, but
No, I'm at Georgetown Ministry Center. Sorry, not the school.
oh, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
That honestly Barbie comes in handy.
Yeah, I know. I really want to use it. I've never been able to get my app to work, so I can't
You
actually
can use
do.
your card.
Oh, can you really?
Yeah, your credit card.
Okay, yeah.
Debit card. 'Cause I don't know how to do this either.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's pretty easy. Like, once you scan it in, you just pull up the like once you use the WeWork app.
Yeah.
put it in.
So my problem is I've never been able to successfully log into the WeWork app. So, and part of the problem, yeah, Jen knows what that's like. So, and the issue for me, I think, is the instructions for you guys are slightly different because you're students. For me, I'm an employee, and I never got the right instructions for how to do it. So, it's not that big of a deal.
So when we get into the actual like curriculum JavaScript, it's
Yep.
gonna go over everything that we've kind of done.
Mhm.
Again.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then the lessons will probably be a little more clarification, I guess.
Yes. So the lessons will largely, like, you should be able to blow through those lessons hopefully by the time we get there. But hopefully, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting because, so like even my plan for next time is to start introducing event listeners, and we'll do some loops. We'll actually probably start building a to-do list app next time.
I think it'll start becoming more brain. The good thing about the curriculums in our class here,
Yep.
because we're literally typing it
Yep,
over and over
you're
again,
doing it. Yep.
We're doing it. So here it's like we can understand the concept until we actually put it down.
No, that's right. That's right. Yeah, so I'm hoping that by going over these things over and over again, it gives you some help when you get to it. But yeah, you won't understand it until you do it. But we'll start a to-do list next time. We'll make it a project for you guys to all actually work on. And to-do lists are great in code as like a first try at something because it has all the pieces. You need loops, you need functions, you need variables, you need conditionals, and it has CRUD. So you need to be able to create something, read something, update something, and delete something. So it has like all the pieces. Once you can do those things, you can do anything in the language. Yeah, and so then a couple weeks after that, I'll probably even start introducing you guys to packages. So like how to use jQuery as opposed to just using pure JavaScript.
jQuery is the library.
jQuery is a library that just makes a lot of this stuff that we're doing with click, etc. easier to do. So for example, so there's this click, and there should be an example down here. So here, right, they've created their HTML, which has this div click here has an ID of target, and what they're saying is $#target, which we know hashtag means ID, right? So find the element that has an ID of target, and then when it's clicked, perform this function. So in our case, what we would have to do is say document.getElementById target.addEventListener click, comma, and then we could put this function in. So it just saves you a whole lot of space and makes it a little bit more clear what's actually going on. The biggest advantage of jQuery is when we get into interacting with APIs. So the way to do this, let me see if I can find Ajax. This example. Okay. So you have to declare an XML HTTP request. You have to look for an onReady state. You have to check to see if the ready state is 4 or it's 200, and then you can do something, and then you have to call the open and the send. Instead of doing all of this, in jQuery, the equivalent would be some URL. Oh, actually, I think the way that this is set up. Where some function does these 3 things. Right, so in these few lines of code, we can do what all of this is, and it's a lot more readable, right? Yeah. So.
There's some like default, I guess, functions that we have to learn too, right? Like some things that are just like customary.
So that's what that API was that I was. I think this. Which one?
Kind of like the what was that one? Like get dates and today, and stuff that's just like no matter what you're typing, or like JavaScript, all recognize that stuff.
So like keywords, things that are actually part of the framework, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So jQuery has its own, because it's its own library. You have to learn all the API documentation there. But yeah, JavaScript has tons of things. W3 Schools is a great place to go find that. So if you come here and go look at JavaScript, statements, objects, numbers, methods, strings. So missions, bitwise, strip mode, debugging, best practices, stage performance. Yeah, this may not be the best. JavaScript string methods. So here you can look and see like what are some of the methods for a string. So for a string you can call .length, which will give you back the number of characters it has. You can call index of, which will try and find locate within here. Let's see, last index of. You can call search to try and find locate, and if it actually exists somewhere inside of the string. Call slice, which will cut off the first 7 to the 13th character. In our case, it'll give back banana. So there's lots of functions that exist. There's delete, which you can pass an object and a key, and it'll delete that key from your object. There's push, which will put things onto an array. There's pop, which will pop things off of an array. So there's lots of these things. The best thing to do really is when you're trying to do something, to just search Google and say, how do I whatever in JavaScript? Yep. So for example, how to add an item to an array, JavaScript. And there's the push. All right, just gives you an example right here. So the output, then fruits at this point is now banana, orange, apple, mango, kiwi. So that's a method. That's a functions are methods. They're interchangeable. Yep. Okay. So back to the lesson. We're going to look at Flexbox a little bit. This is a great place to go and look at Flexbox. They also have a grid, which I'll put into Slack as well. Let's see, so Maybe Vishal is actually on the live stream. Let's see. Pin that.
No. Oh. Is that what that is?
Uh-huh.
Oh, he said he wasn't.
Yeah, so he said he's not there, but he's on the YouTube stream.
Oh, you have a YouTube stream?
Yeah, so if you look in the pin section over here on the right, there's this crazy link that exists. You can click on it. It actually has all the previous classes in there too. So
Oh.
yeah, so it has everything. So it says live now. Michelle. Yep.
Sam will be famous in about a year with all his
All the videos out there.
It's like you guys have to pay me to talk to me.
Yeah.
Our questions on YouTube.
Oh yeah, yeah. Don't worry, they can't see you. They don't know who you are.
Say that sounds like
Yeah. So okay, I don't have it. Like the stream isn't public. I don't even know if you can search for it. I think you have to have the link. But okay, so Flexbox, we saw a little bit of this already. The way that you create a Flexbox is you have a containing div. In our case, it was article. And in their case, it's a div that has a class of container. And you have the attribute of or the property of display and the value of flex. Right? So our selector is container, property display, value flex. And then the next thing that you want to do is give it a flex direction. So basically, do I want the items inside of my container div to act like they're in a row? So are they going to be columns in a row, or are they going to be rows in a column? And what it defaults to is row. So it'll look like this. So if this is our header, our main, and our footer, it'll make them look like a row. If you say I want my flex direction to be column, then it'll go on top of each other like this. You can also use row reverse, which in our case would make it go footer, main, header. And you can reverse the column, so you can put the footer on top and then main and then the header. So this is, again, this is a really nice way of displaying what all of these pieces do. The next one is flex wrap. What flex wrap does is it says, hey, if you're creating a row and they get too wide for the screen, you can just drop the item onto the next line. Right? So it's very simple. Saying I want to be able to allow it to wrap. The way you do that is just flex wrap, and then you can say no wrap is the default. You can wrap, or you can wrap reverse, which wrap reverse will, again, just pop it off of the left side instead of off the right side.
You put those all as options within the same line.
Yeah, so the way that these are set up, they're just different attributes, so you would put them on top of each other. Yep, just like you would do background color and whatever. So we'll do some of these examples. I just want to walk through what the pieces are first.
But with the wrap, no wrap, and wrap reverse, you only need one of
You
them.
only need one of those. Yeah, so these are the these are the options that are available. So you can say flex wrap, no wrap, which won't do any wrap. That's the default. Or you can put wrap, or you can put wrap reverse.
Are there any, I mean, I'm pretty sure, are there any like local sites that are probably using some Flex right now that we can, they have tools or no? If you don't know, don't worry about it. But.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are tons. I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, ours is, but it wouldn't be as obvious as you might think to see what the rules are because of the way that the framework we use, etc.
Oh, okay.
But we'll build a little site here in a minute. All right, and then we have Flex Flow, which is a way of putting. So you can do it inline. So you can say Flex Flow : row space wrap. It's just a shorthand for the other two. So instead of having to do two attributes on top of each other, you can do both of them inline. It's kind of like how you can do border style, border width, border, yeah, right? You can do them as three different things, or you can just do border 1 pixel space solid space black. It's the same concept, it's just shorthand. All right, the next thing is really cool. It's called justify content. The options are flex start, flex end, center, space between, space around, or space evenly. What this does is it says, hey, if you're doing a flexive row and you have 3 items, if they're small enough, it'll pull them all the way to the left. You can say flex end, it'll push them all the way to the right. You can center them, which will put space around them on the outside. You can say space between, which will spread all the pieces apart. You can say space around, which will keep them away from the edges, so they're not actually touching like space between on the edges, but it also puts space between them. And then you can do space evenly, which just evenly spaces it all the way around.
So we're talking about flex boxes.
Yes, this is all Flexbox. And then the final thing is align items. And this is basic, so in the case of the row, we can say flex start, which doesn't make them take up the whole width, flex end, which pushes them down, center, stretch, right? So what this is doing is, in the case of being in flex row, we are saying, do we want to like stretch these items to take up the entire height, or do we want them to just stay at the top and take up as much content as we want? So we'll go through and actually do these things now. So,
Question: would you say that the concept is pretty much the same with like if you're doing a web page versus a like a responsive email template?
so responsive email's hard. The reason that email is hard is different email clients render things differently. Your best bet, generally speaking, with email is to style the items inline. So instead of doing, like we have a different file where we're putting our CSS and then we're linking it in, you would want to say like style equals display flex, like right here in the page. Now, the issue with using Flex in email clients is I just don't know how well like Outlook supports Flex, because just Microsoft doesn't seem to keep up with stuff, and so it just might not work. You could certainly try it, you know, just if you have an Outlook account, build the email and then send it and see what happens. But yeah. All right, so right now we've got our article. Going to remove the media queries for a moment just so that it's more straightforward. We're going to just start with our flex direction being row. And now if we go back to our page, we just see that they're in a row. They're all about equal size. They're all taking up the full width. Yep.
So there's no flex box.
There's no Flexbox class because we have article. Here, let's do this. So instead of doing it with article as our selector, we're going to create a class that's called a row. And we're going to say that it's going to display flex and be in the direction of row. And then we're going to create another class that's called column. And for now, we'll just make the background color for the column, but we won't do anything else.
I guess I'm a little confused about how it already knows that you're doing flex box. Like if you set this display to flex and it is a flex box, you don't need to do flex box class.
Nope. As soon as you say, so what I'm saying is anything that has a class of row, that is going to be a flex box.
Okay.
Because I'm putting display flex.
Okay. And then in your HTML.
So then in my HTML, I need to have a div that has a class of row.
Okay.
For that to know. That's how it knows. That make sense? And then generally we would make, so I'm going to move away from main footer, etc., because we're going to have multiple of these, but and then let's just, whoops. We'll make these our columns.
Would you say this is simpler than doing like the table tag?
So, I don't know what so a couple things. One, yes, because it's a lot harder, as we'll see as you get more advanced, to get the table to do what you want.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were to create the table, what I would end up with is this would be 3 little cells up here, probably. So then if I want them to like spread out, like if I wanted, I can create margin, but that's about it. And the other issue is if it was too big, so if it was a massive table, like this was a lot of content inside of here, it would go way off the screen. And so what I would probably want to do in that case is have it wrapped down, but you can't do that in a table. So tables are what people used to use, like in early web days, to get a structure where you can have a lot of control over where your things are being placed. But the problem is when you get into responsive web design, it just is incredibly limiting. So it's just, we're basically doing the same thing as creating a table, but in a little bit more flexible way. Which is why it's actually useful to name these things row and column. Like this is a typical grid structure. Okay, so we say flex direction is row. Let's see, what do we want to do? Let's start by just changing the flex direction just so that we can see what happens with that. So the first thing, I'll change it to be row reverse. See what happened? It'll flip sides. So now right side and then right. Second thing I'll do is let's make the flex direction be column. So now it acts like a column. They're sitting on top of each other. And then let's change it to column reverse. And now again, they just flip, right? So it's that simple to be able to make those changes. And you can see like where media queries in combination with this become particularly powerful. All right, so next thing, we'll do flex wrap. We might have to create some additional columns. I'm not sure if it's going to actually wrap yet. No. Let's change this back to row so it is something that can wrap. Okay, so they're actually wrapping if the screen got big enough. They should come back. Let's do something like this. Width is okay. So when I make the columns have widths of 30 pixels, and I'll change the HTML so it's not so crazy with all these words. So we'll just have it be 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we have 1, 2, and 3, and they're just sitting there. If I make the width very large for each of these columns, say 500 pixels, then they wrap over because they're too big. If I make it like 200, there's a point at which 2 of them will stay on the top. Yeah, so that's what flex wrap does. It basically says if you're taking up more of the screen than there is screen going as a row, and I say flex wrap is wrap, then it'll wrap down. Otherwise, it will just push the screen out. So now it has a vertical scroll, essentially. So flex wrap is a really nice way to like allow content to fall down if you have a bunch of things that are sitting next to each other. Because then if I make this small again, come on. There we go. What are you doing? There we go. So if I make it small, as I make it smaller and larger, it'll actually have the things drop, depending on what my screen size is.
So is this, what was we used the style last time?
The float?
The float with the
Yep.
scroll?
Yep.
Is that kind of like the opposite of what this would be? So you can't do both of this?
So, are you talking?
Is that you put that float with the scroll, and then you also put the wrap. How would that work?
So you wouldn't use float and flex at the same time.
Right.
The float was the thing that like moved the div to the left of, right? So normally we had set it up so that it went top, middle, bottom, and then we said float the top thing to the left, and then the center thing came up to the right. So you wouldn't use float and flexbox at the same time. The overflow scroll, which is where your content is bigger than the div that's containing it, you can still use that in flexbox. There's no problem with that.
that has nothing to do with the page, it's more so the div itself.
It's the div itself. Yeah, so it's more about like the content inside of the div. So in our case, it's just 1, 2, and 3 right now. But if there are actual words in there, we could still use overflow scroll to allow you to scroll within the thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah. All right, and then we'll do justify content, which is a pretty interesting and useful thing. So we'll say justify content, space around to start with. So, and you can see that what's happening here is we're not touching the edge. We have our full width of 250 pixels, and it's putting space both around them and between the two divs, so they're not touching anymore. On the second line, with the single item wrapped, it puts space around itself because there's nothing else for it to space out against. Okay? But it is completely spaced. All right.
How do you justify the actual content again?
So if you want to align the 3 and the 2, so there's a couple of ways to do that. The easiest is probably just, in this case, text center, I think. Nope. Oh, spelling. Yeah, there you go. All right. So we can also do, instead of justifying content with space around, we could do space between. And we're going to see that it all matches up to those graphs that you can already see space between. So now it puts space between them as opposed to putting it around them. And then we can do space evenly. And back to what we have with space around, or we can do start, back to start, or we can do end. It might actually be, it's flex end. Pushes it to the right. And then the last piece is the align items, which will allow it to essentially move those items within the row to be at a specific point. In our case, probably not going to see much. If I put content back into these, we'd see something more interesting. But let's just try. So if we do it with center, yeah, there's nothing particularly. But if I put, so basically if we put other divs inside of here, you see how, so what this align item center is doing is it's keeping this second div at the center of the entire row. You see what I'm saying? So like a row, if I inspect that, oh, well, it's weird with the third one. So what I'm saying is that our row's height on this first row is the height of this, is the height of whatever the biggest container is. And so it's centering the 2 on that row. If I do end, it'll drop it to the bottom. If I do start, it'll bring it to the top. So if I go back. See how it went to the top? And then if I do end, it'll go to the bottom. Oh. Is it bottom? Yeah, I got the flex end. Oops. There we go. Flex end, and it goes to the bottom. Okay. The only other thing with Flexboxes is that you can also do some alignment. Well, so this one's interesting. You can reorder the children if you want to. The way that you do that is by explicitly telling it what order you want a particular item to be in. So you could say, create a class called first, and we're going to create an order of -1 so that it goes to the very beginning. And if we apply that class to, say, our second div, see, so it just reorders. Order literally just reorders based on the order that you're doing. And then,
So you said you could put first column, and what did you put second column?
so we have our columns, right? So we have each one of these is a column, which all that really means in our CSS right now is that they have a width of 250 pixels, they have a background color of BBB, and they have a text line of center. But then I'm creating another class called first, and that is just going to reset their order. Whoever has first as a class will go to the beginning of the row.
Okay.
And so in our case, I put first on the second item, and so when we look at it, it's now the first item.
Okay, and then you could likewise do like second.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so then we could, like, we can do, say, first is 1, and then, because it's all about the relative order that's being added. By default, order is 0, but you can say second and make that 2, and then third, and make that 3. And then we just have to apply them in whatever way we want. So the second one is first, maybe the third one is second, and the first one is third, just to get it all mixed up. And so you can see, we've just completely reordered everything. Flex grow can be useful. You can allow it to, like, essentially, you can set a specific width or height for 2 of the columns and then put flex grow on the middle item, and then the middle item will grow to take over whatever extra space exists. Flex shrink is the opposite. So if you put flex shrink on one item and you put a specific width on the other ones, it will shrink down to allow everything else to have space. And then align self is another useful one. So it's the same as what we were doing with align items over here, except that you can apply it to just a single item, not to all of them. So if you have a particular thing that has, so if you have your row set as flex start, but you want a particular item to go to the bottom, then you just do align self flex end, and it'll bring that one down to the bottom. So this is the advantage over tables, right? There's a whole lot more flexibility in what you can do very easily than what you'd be able to do with the table. Cool? Questions? All right. So yeah, that's the big parts of the lesson for today. So then we'll let you guys keep working on the labs. I'll be here to help. I know some people had some questions that are running into issues, so I'll try to help you through.
I'm all over the place today.
Yeah, no worries.